Hey everybody, Adrian Nelson here, and in this video I want to speak about your higher self. Like a lot of people are talking about your higher self, and I'm a regression hypnosis practitioner, and a lot of times people come into a session and they say, I want to hear what my higher self have got to say. And then I will ask them, you do realize that you are actually your higher self, or as a human being you are actually what some people sometimes call a fractal of light, but you are a physical manifestation of your higher self. And before I delve into the details, what I just want to be very, very clear about right from the start is that what I am giving you is the ultimate truth, but not necessarily the full truth. And what I mean by that is that when you look into the universe and how everything is put together and how it flows and all those sort of things, there is always balance, and we call it different things: positive and negative, male and female, yin and yang, direct opposites, up, down, left, right, all that sort of stuff. So what I am saying is that what I am telling you, it is the accepted truth, but it's also just a part of the truth. In order for something to be fully true in one equation, it also has to be fully true in another equation. So I know that might sound like a bit of a vast concept sometimes, but a lot of times people put across information and they will say to you, this is it, the undisputable truth, which may be true, but it also has by being one, it also has a other side. By default it must have at least two sides, because the universe is dual. All right, so you may take on what I say and you'll be like, oh my goodness, that's amazing, that's incredible, this is the answers that I've been seeking for. Or you may hear what I say and it may activate something else inside of you that maybe takes you in a different direction of enlightenment and understanding, because enlightenment is just really, it's like switching on the light in a room. The room has always been there, everything inside the room has always been there, but now you switch the light on and you can actually see it, that sort of thing, basically. Enlightenment in a nutshell. So higher self, what is the vibe with higher self? So with your higher self, it is really, when you think about the allness of who you are. Well, let's actually take that back a little bit more. Now, for some of you, what I'm about to say next might be a little bit of a big concept, or quite a big concept to just accept within your mind. And if it feels too vast to accept it, then I would say just sit with it. Just leave it be. And, if you don't feel comfortable with it right now, then just leave it. And maybe tomorrow or the day after, you can maybe revisit the video again and see how do you feel about it now. Sometimes our mind does need some time to process things, and there is absolutely, absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like, you actually want to give yourself that. All right. So if you think of the concept that we have of the concept of God, the creator, you can really call God whatever, God, Jehovah, I call it source of all. But think of the concept of the creator. And so the creator created all of that which we have, all of that which we are. But if you think in your own life, let's imagine you want to make lunch. So the lunch that you make, you will be the creator of that lunch. All right. And maybe some of you will say, well, how can you compare the entire, creation to lunch? And I'll say, is the one really superior to the other? Does the one really have to be sort of like, above the other or not? Because that's where we have the concept of separation really coming in sometimes. But separation is a conversation for a different day. I do speak about that a little bit in the other video that I'm making along with this one, which is about reincarnation, karma, and love. And the two sort of go hand in hand together, and obviously they go hand in hand together with many other things as well. And I'm trying to really keep it simple here for you. So When you create lunch, you think of it, well, what do I feel like today? And is it just for me, or is it for other people, or is it for us? Is it a hot day? Is it a cold day? What do I have available? Do I want to go to the store? Am I going to see what's in my fridge? What's in my cupboard? You know, how much money do I have? How much time do I have? And just really how much drive do I have to make this lunch? Do I even want to make this lunch in the first place? So all of that is going to really determine what you basically come up with at the end of the day. You know, what are the eating preferences and sort of like maybe allergies and whatever. So I want you to almost sort of think of the creator in that sort of way. So just for a moment, imagine yourself being the creator of our universe. Okay? So let's imagine that you already live in this, let's call it an environment where everything is going really, really great. So you're happy and you're just having your everyday life in the same way that we have our everyday lives here on planet Earth. So you're going about your day and you're thinking thoughts, and whatever you think, you are also creating. So let's imagine that in the same way when you often go for sort of like law of attraction manifestation coaching, that's well, what are your thoughts thinking? Because whatever you are thinking is what you are creating. So it's almost the same sort of concept, really. You know, what are you thinking? Because your thoughts are creating your reality. So think of the creator as a being that lives in an environment that is amazing, that is balanced, where everybody's happy with one another, everything is free flowing, everything is beautiful. And then the creator come up with this amazing concept of, you know, maybe this planet surrounded by other planets, and like let's imagine that there's a sky with some stars, then there's all sorts of life, and he thinks up us and that sort of thing, and this is creation. All right, so with all of that being said, so now here is us, and by being here, actually everything that's alive, we have been thought up, or you know, and basically conceived from their thoughts into the reality that we are right now. So we are an expansion, an expression, a natural progression of that thought, of that energy set forth. Because remember, energy, thoughts are energetic, thoughts carry power, thoughts are creative. So what you think about is what you bring about, what you focus on, you draw into reality. Now, a lot of times, if you bring it back to planet Earth, you know, when we think about manifestation, you think of, I'm going to think of that so I can create that. But you're not really creating anything because everything already exists. And you cannot, whether you look at it in a spiritual way, whether you look at it in a scientific way, you cannot think about what you can't conceive, and you can't conceive what isn't somehow true inside of you, that on some level doesn't exist inside of you already. In the same way, you can't see something that is not within yourself. So when you see the evil in another person, or you see the absolute beauty in another person, it means that it's the part inside of you that is observing that part to the outside, because the outside world is a reflection, a projection of what's happening inside of us. All right? So if you kind of make that picture just a little bit bigger and you think of the creator, so the creator thinks of us creating this planet, but because we originated from their thought, you know, we sprang forth from their thought, means that we carry the essence of their thought. All right, and the essence of their thought knows everything. And of course, here on this beautiful planet Earth, we have the opportunity to think of things in individual sort of like terms and concepts, you know, me and you, that sort of thing. But it's really we and us, because and actually when you say me and I, it's actually, I would probably say more correct. And the reason why I say that is because remember, even though we experience individuality, we are part of the one thought that has sprang forth. So in the same way that, let's say you're making a salad, you know, so, and just a regular salad, so there's maybe different sorts of lettuce in there, and there's some tomatoes and like some onions, and if you're like me, maybe there's like a lot of crushed garlic in there, and some olive oil and balsamic, and you know, all sorts of other really goodies, like you know, all sorts of other amazing things. So you can look at those things on the plate and look at them individually as like, oh, there's a piece of cucumber, you know, there's an artichoke, that sort of thing. But essentially, when somebody says to you, what did you have for lunch? You know, you can break it down and say, I had this and this and that, and I had coarse lettuce and butter lettuce, and it, you know, this was chopped like that. Or you can just say, I had a salad, you know, and it's still the same thing. And it's the same thing with us. So we're part of everything, and even though we have this experience of individuality, which is really amazing for soul progression, which I do speak quite a bit on that reincarnation, karma, and love video, we are all still the same thing. We from the same source. We've got the same essence. The outside may differ, but the core essence that runs through us is the same, and it's all connected, and it's not separated. So when you speak about your higher self, we speak about that core essence, that core knowing. Now, something very interesting that happened with the higher self, some of you may or may not know. So I channel this collective consciousness. I've been channeling them for years, and they call themselves Smile. And so this one day I was doing this exercise with my best friend, who is an amazing coach. I'm going to put a link here for you at the end. So I'm going to put a link at the end as well as the other video. I did a video with her. She is a social media specialist for spiritualists, which is like you want to watch that video. It's amazing. I'll put it at the end for you. But so she was doing this exercise with me, which is something that she does with her clients quite a lot. And she said, I want you to write a letter to your future self. And I said, okay, I'm going to do that. And then when I was done with that, she said, now I want you to write a letter from your future self back to you. And I remember when I was doing that, Smile was popping up. And I was like, you know what, you all, it's wonderful that you're here. You're taking this journey with me. But I am waiting for some communication from my higher self. And they were like, who do you think we are? You know, and it was really, really profound for me. I'm telling you, I was flabbergasted in an amazing way for probably about 3-4 days, because I just didn't figure it out. And I was like, why did you guys never tell me that you are my future self or my higher self? And they said, well, you just never asked, you know. So you can tap into your future self. And when you do, you can get amazing information coming through. And I've been doing that for years without even realizing exactly what it is that I was doing. I was just like, I'm channeling from the universe, you know. So when we speak about your future self, it is that consciousness that is always around you. Because remember, you've got your soul, or some of you may not know, and if you really want to get into this, you might want to look into a book that was released in 1972 called Seth Speaks. You can either buy the book, it's really an amazing book, don't have it here to show you now, or you can also, if you look on YouTube, there are some audio recordings of that as well. All right, it's called Seth Speaks, S-E-T-H Speaks. And it speaks, it explains it so beautifully that the consciousness is really in service of the soul, because the soul is that, if you want to call it maybe the all universal consciousness, and consciousness as we refer to it, it is the soul being aware of itself, having this incarnation of life or many other incarnations of life, because we're having many incarnations simultaneously. And if I can just go back with this just a little bit, you know, what regression hypnosis that I do, or some of us, you know, sometimes called past life regression hypnosis. You know, what we think of as past life, so what is today's date? Today is October the 21st, 2022. Some amazing numerology happening over there, by the way. You know, everything is happening at the same time. And sometimes the soul would like to have different experiences. I'm going to speak about this more in the reincarnation video, because that's really where this is going towards. But, you know, you can say, I'd like to have this experience or that experience. I'd like to do this and I'd like to do that. And sometimes we reincarnate singly, we reincarnate in a group. And you say, well, what is the best time for me to do this at? You know, what is the best sort of stage that I can set? And Dolores Cannon, the founder of QHHT, Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique, she speaks about that quite a lot, where you can be in 2022 right now, but you maybe realize there's a different lesson that I want to learn or something else that I want to do. So then, you know, you can incarnate now and either be in 2022 or be in 1943, something like that, you know, or 1602 for that matter. But it can also be in the future. It can be on a different planet. And it's consciousness that is making you aware, hello, Baba, of that experience that is taking place. Oh, you're beautifully healing, right? He needed to do some healing. My little Baba was a little bit sick there for a while, but all is well now, and I'm so happy about it. And you're just going to chill here, all right? We are speaking about higher self, Bruno. All right, so with your higher self, it is that conscious awareness of the allness of who you are. And our higher self, which is really our all consciousness, which is our connection to the allness that we are. Because just because you come to this planet and have this individual experience doesn't mean that you are ever really separated from the allness of who you are. I don't really think the soul would be able to handle that in actual fact, you know, because Earth is a very difficult incarnation. I always say that Earth is a little bit like the wild, wild west of the universe, you know. It's challenging being on Earth, and it's challenging for the soul being on Earth. And even a lot of your experience of life is often determined by, for example, when the soul decides to enter like the fetus upon birth, because the soul isn't always part of the fetus just from the very beginning. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about it when I do make the video about reincarnation, that I kind of like decided at the last moment, I'm not sure if I want to be or not, which actually resulted in me having a near-death experience, which also explains quite a lot why I'm so psychic, you know, naturally psychic. But psychic ability is something that you can learn. So this stuff that I'm sharing with you, these are things that I would often share with my sort of like psychic development students, things like Reiki maybe, advanced tarot. Those are sort of like the stuff that I would basically teach in those coaching sessions. But typically we need a little bit of our foot in the door before we, you know, before you go to that next level. Otherwise, what's meant to help you just confuse you. That sort of thing doesn't really benefit you. I'm not saying that you can't have the coaching, don't get me wrong. But anyway, that's a little bit of the point. So when you sleep, you often go back to that connection with the higher self again. And this is why sometimes we get a lot of our solutions in our sleep state. And if you, something really amazing to work with is the work that you do in your dream state. And when I sort of do kind of like advanced sort of like psychic development coaching, you know, I speak a lot about the dream state and the awareness of going to those sub levels, which is really incredible, because I remember from a very young age actually, you know, I would say that this world isn't real. This world doesn't exist. This world is a dream. It's an illusion. And when we sleep, we go home and people's like, what are you talking about? You know, you always have these weird things that you are talking about. But so the higher self is ever present. It's a part of us that knows everything. It's the hard drive that knows everything. You know, it's the information on the cloud, so to speak, I would imagine. And maybe the cloud, as you know, the IT cloud and those things, the Google clouds and the Apple clouds and the whatever clouds, maybe they were conceived from the higher self, because technically speaking, that is very much, give or take, long and short, of the 101 of the 101 of what the higher self is. You know, it is a cloud base, a storage base, a bank of information of the allness of who we are. And you know, I'm not all that familiar on Kabbalah. I'm studying Kabbalah at the moment, but you know, there's those different levels that you go into consciousness. But even when you begin to study things like sacred geometry, you get to see stuff, and it's amazing. And the more you see, the more your mind opens, because the more you are reminded, basically, of the allness that you've always been. It's really, really incredible. It's mind-blowingly incredible. And so you can, you know, so something I would recommend for you to work with your higher self and to grow a closer relationship with your higher self is to maybe start doing some dream work, basically. And something that I do is I write on a piece of paper and I call it rewind the tape. And I kind of came up with this one day when I was doing, I had like a psychic channeling session for one of my clients, which is a little bit different to tarot, because in a tarot reading, it's very much about your life here and now. And with a sort of like a channeling session, or the channeling sessions that I do, because they would smile, it's more about your karmic reincarnations, you know, what is holding you back. And I mean, you do that in regression hypnosis as well, but sometimes people are wary of regression hypnosis, even though you really don't need to be. There's a lot of beautiful preparation that you can do. But you know, sometimes people prefer the channeling first, which is amazing, because you know, you get to see, okay, so why are you having these things in this life? Why is this happening? What is that happening? And then obviously I do things like Reiki and crystal healing to help you rebalance that energy in a way that can really work for you. But what you can do is, like, so on a piece of paper, you write rewind the tape. So as you go to bed, you put it underneath your pillow, and your consciousness understand that you go over everything that happened in the day, you know, to see maybe there were some opportunities that you weren't aware of. Maybe there was a thought that came about that could be very beneficial for you, maybe an idea, an epiphany, but then at that moment maybe you were doing something else, or that one went past you. So when you do rewind the tape, you know, then what happens is maybe you either wake up with inspiration, you wake up with a breakthrough, you wake up with an answer, or as you go through your day, you get that spark of motivation, that spark of intuition. You know, you go like, oh, I can do that. And I've had many of those, many of those experiences. You know, you can also, something that works really amazing is if you maybe get yourself, again, I don't have it here, because I don't really plan out these things when I do them. I just share the information. You know, when I make a lot of notes and whatever, I just go all over the place. So, but you get yourself a piece of kyanite, a beautiful piece of blue kyanite specifically, and maybe just place it either underneath your pillow if that works, on your bedstand, or right next to you. Just something to bear in mind with kyanite, that if you get it wet, then it can sort of, you know, weaken the structure of the crystal, or you can become damaged, it can break and things like that. It can even dissolve in water. So just make sure that your kyanite's in a space that's dry. You know, don't keep it next to like a fountain, for example, because it will start to absorb that moisture and then sort of like begin to disintegrate. So keeping a kyanite next to the bed, that's really an amazing way and a lot of times people will say kyanite is really amazing to start getting beautiful dreams. But in our dream state, we already travel everywhere. You know, the consciousness really, and the soul basically needs a break from the body, because earth living, human living is challenging. So we'll probably go all over the place. And so a lot of times people think when they use kyanite, you know, it helps you to be able to start, for example, astral traveling or astral projecting, or doing things like remote viewing, or, you know, visit other, spaces, other incarnations, other planets, other beings. But what kyanite really does, it helps you to remember that you are already doing that. And you can also really, you know, say for example, you've got something really pressing on your mind as you go to bed. You can set the intention that in your dream state you'd like to work this out, and you can even set the intention that you'd like to remember the things that are happening in your dream, and then you might be surprised at things that are coming up. So what I normally recommend is keeping a dream journal, but keeping it a little bit differently to what some people might, you know, sort of put it sometimes. And so maybe you have a book, you can use 2 books, but 1 is fine. So you set your intention forth. So before you go to bed, you set your intention forth, and things like, I would really appreciate this will be cool, that will be nice, you know. You don't always have to use all these high convoluted words, and that's your vibe. If that's your vibe, then perfect. But, you know, I'd like to remember this, I'd like to recall this would be nice, this would be great, that'll be wonderful, that'll be fantastic. And then go to sleep, and then whenever you wake up in the middle of the night, or if you just wake up, write down whatever comes to mind first, whatever it is. When you start looking back, you'll start seeing a pattern there, and that is your higher self basically speaking to you. Our higher self is always speaking to us. Solutions are always available to us. It's just that sometimes we are not that good at hearing. Things that can maybe help you to grow a closer connection with your higher self is to maybe, let's say for example, you like to have, say maybe an alcoholic drink or a very strongly caffeinated beverage before you go to bed, because whilst a lot of people say you can't drink caffeine and go to sleep, I tell you I can drink a strong cup of coffee and I'll go to bed and I'll be straight down in bed. But I've got very strong control over my mind, and you know, it takes work and it takes discipline, it takes practice, and you can learn how to do that. Because psychic ability and channeling is really nothing more than you just receiving communication from the quantum field, the allness, which technically speaking is your higher self, you know. And that is the same for mediumship, you know, speaking to past loved ones, connecting to source, and so forth and so forth and so forth. Now, it's obviously a lot more intricate than that, but that is basically the long and short of it, you know. Things that could also maybe help is try to lay away from anything watching on a screen before you go to bed, you know. So watching anything on your laptop, your phone, television, maybe have a little bit of a meditation, go to bed, have some water, which really helps for the flow, but it also helps you to maybe wake up every now and then. So you keep on waking up in the state instead of having one sleep through where you begin to forget things, then maybe your consciousness suppresses it, okay. if you may be a heavy smoker, you might want to say maybe, I know I used to smoke. I think giving up smoking was the hardest thing I've ever done. It took me 13 attempts before I was able to stop smoking. It was really, really hard. But maybe lay off a smoke at least 30 minutes, 45 minutes before you go to bed. Um, um, if you are very familiar in how to take plant medicine in a knowledgeable sort of way, and even something like marijuana can help you. Yeah, but when I say marijuana, I'm not talking about smoking yourself into a delirium. That's not what I'm talking about. It's just getting yourself into that space. So maybe work with someone like a shaman, or somebody who's very familiar with plant medicine. Things like magical mushrooms in what they call microdosing. So again, you're not putting yourself in this delirium sort of state, because you still want to be conscious of what is happening. So those are things that work really, really well. Okay, and even just surrounding yourself with a beautiful space. In my bedroom, I've got some beautiful plants that I have. And I keep some crystals, and I just keep the safe space nice and safe and nice and clean and nice and calm, because that also really does help with that connection really, really beautifully. And I think, just to finish off, the thing to remember is that we are always connected to your higher self. As a human being, you are really a physical expression of universal possibility, and you are really your higher self that is choosing to come into this human incarnation as a human being, as an animal, as a plant. And sometimes we will, for example, think that, like some people still have the idea, for example, that humans are above plants, but not necessarily. Maybe let's take Bruno's soul, for example. So you wanted to maybe come to this planet to just experience pure love without having to do that much. Maybe you're a soul that doesn't feel like doing that much. You don't have to think about debt and, a roof over your head and a car and a job. You don't want to do any of those things. Or maybe you could be two souls, that the one soul is coming to support the other soul in this conscious experience of life. But maybe it's a soul that has sort of like gone through all its incarnations, and it's just coming to help you here. So it's just coming to raise your vibration, so it's easier for you. So that soul doesn't have to go through the trials and tribulations of a human being, and maybe doesn't want to be on this planet that long either. It's amazing when you do communication with animals, the things that you can get sometimes, because you may think, oh, it's so tragic, my animal left, and animals like, listen, I've done my part, I'm out of here, ciao. That sort of thing. But maybe it could be a higher soul that is just coming in to give you unconditional love, because maybe that's all you need to raise your vibration to get through a difficult space. And then when that is done, that soul can either choose to leave or choose to stay. So when we really begin to look at things from a higher soul perspective, a lot of times we think it's something that separates us, but it's really something that unites us, because we get to see how perfectly, like that perfect puzzle piece, we slot into everything. All right, so that's all that I've got for now. Be sure to look at the other video as well if you haven't already watched it. And from my heart, namaste, love and light.